So hello and welcome. Well, with me today, Elena Clady and Dimitra Karala, two colleagues from the British Council, and my name is Cliff Parry. And welcome to the first of our vlogs entitled How Did You? And what we're going to be doing over the next few months is sharing some tips for the classroom, yes, for you as teachers, but also sharing some tips for the parents of your students, the parents of your learners. So today our topic is, I think, how did you learn to learn? And I think that's best described or best illustrated by some stories.
I'll tell you about when I was a student and I had to memorize history lessons. All students can relate to that. What I had to do in order to memorize all the information, like the places, the names, and the dates, was to underline or highlight this important information. And after that, I used to take all this information and create diagrams, mind maps, flow charts, so that I can have them there, see them, and be able to memorize the lesson.
I can tell you how I started learning English. As a child, I didn't really understand the language, the vocabulary, the expressions, the idioms. But because I've always been a musical person, I like listening to music. And I started paying attention to the lyrics of the songs. I could easily memorize the lyrics, I would write them down, I would sing the songs all day long. And this way it became easier for me to understand the language, and above all, it was fun and enjoyable.
Now, as for me, I suppose pictures play a role, as does music, as does song. But I'm a person who likes to learn through doing things. And I suppose the best example is I love motorbikes. I've been riding bikes for years, motorbikes for years. Now, you can certainly learn a little bit about motorbikes by looking at pictures of them, but not much. You can certainly learn how to ride a motorbike by listening to the instructions of your teacher, your instructor. But to be honest, in order to become a good motorbike rider, you've got to get on a bike. You've got to do it. So for me, it's learning by doing. So I think what we have now are three ways of learning. Learning through pictures. I suppose we could say visual. Learning through sounds. I suppose we could say auditory or musical. And learning through doing or through movement. And I guess we could say this rather long word, kinesthetic. So now, let's get to those promised tips, okay? Tips for you as teachers and tips for the parents of your learners.
For the classroom and the teachers. So when it comes to visual learners, the whiteboard is a teacher's best friend. So they can give their visual learners the opportunity to draw pictures and diagrams on the whiteboard, ask them to doodle examples based on the topic of the learning, and they can include images to go along with the lesson. Another tip would be to sit visual learners near the front of the classroom, where they can see the whiteboard.
What about parents? I mean, parents don't have a whiteboard at home.
Well, yes, they don't, but I'm sure they can all buy a simple board for their children, which is a nice thing to have when they realize that their children are visual learners. So the children can have their own board at home, which they can use to represent learning in visual and creative ways. And they can also provide their children with a lot of stationery, like highlighters or stickers or other things that they can use in order to make everything visually distinct.
I have two keywords for teachers. The first one is repetition. It goes without saying that repetition is the mother of learning. So the more we repeat, the easier it becomes for our students to retain the information. And the second keyword is intonation. Don't be afraid to play with your voice, experiment with your voice. It's the melody your students hear that helps them understand the expressions and thoughts that go with the words. The first tip I would give to a parent is to observe their child. In other words, let them express themselves. Pay attention to their interests, to what they like, what they don't like. And the second tip, make sure that in the space where they study, there are no distractions so that they can concentrate more easily and they can be more productive.
And I guess to me now, the tips of movement, the kinesthetic tips for the classroom, well, I think they've been covered, okay, in some ways. Build movement into your lesson. Allow the children to come to the board and touch it, for example, or move the flashcards around. But also remember that movement is not just about walking around the classroom. It's about moving things on the desk. So arranging flashcards in a certain order, or maybe drawing things and moving the pencil around your page. So different kinds of movement in the classroom. And my tips for the parents would be similar in a sense. First and foremost, okay, let's move the children around a little bit. So there's a space for learning, but there's also a space for sleeping. And there's also a space for eating, and it's not always the same space. And encourage the children to move their learning. Perhaps there could be fridge magnets with words, or perhaps there could be Post-its, and they can put them in different orders or in different arrangements according to how they feel or what they know or what they feel they could know better. So move, move, move. Okay, I think we've come more or less to the end of our top tips for you as teachers and top tips for the parents of your learners, okay? Our top tips concerned what, Elena?
Well, we all have different learning styles. That's the top tip, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to find out your learning style, your child's learning style, or your student's learning style, follow the link that we'll leave in this video and wait for our next video for more tips and strategies on learning to learn.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a goodbye from me, Cliff Parry.
A goodbye from me, Elena Kladdy.
And goodbye from me, Dimitra Karala.